so the next topic for our panel discussion, comprehensive digital governance from law and order, cyber security, information technology to energy to education. And with this topic, I would like to invite on stage the moderator, Mr. Rishi Varshni, Executive Director, Deloitte India. Can we welcome sir with a round of applause? Can I have some energy, everybody? Let's put our hands together and let's welcome the moderator, Mr. Rishi. Thank you so much for joining us. Let me quickly introduce you to the panelists. We have Mr. Merin Joseph, IPS Superintendent of Police Crime Branch, Thiruvananthapuram. Thank you so much, Ms. Merin, for joining us here. We also have Mr. Amit Sharma, IAS Secretary IT, Science and Tech, Transport, R&D and MD, CITCO, Union Territory of Ladakh. A very warm welcome to you, sir. We have Mr. Amrit Singh, IAS Director, Department of Higher Education, Government of Punjab. Yes, do we have Ms. Amrit Singh, IAS Director, Department of Higher Education, Government of Punjab here with us? Okay, I think ma'am would be joining us. Yeah, no problem, you can just call. We have Mr. P. Venu Prasad, Joint Director, Infra and Communications, Department of IDENC, Government of Telangana. Mr. Kaushik Haldar, Manager in ISO Education Information Technology, Emerging Technology from Webble. And we also have Mr. Manish Manocha, Advocate, Partner, Lex Locum Consulting LLP. Thank you so much for joining us, sir. Let's quickly just wait for Amrit Singh. All right, thank you so much, sir. Please be seated. All right, so as we get started, I would like to hand it over to the moderator, Mr. Rishi. So it's a 30 minutes panel discussion and I would prompt you 5 minutes before. Thank you so much.
This panel to all my esteemed panel members. So today's topic of the panel is comprehensive digital governance. So in the morning we had other panels which were essentially on e-governance initiatives and then about evolution to the revolution to AI. And now this panel discussion is largely going to be around comprehensive digital governance. Now, comprehensive digital governance in India has evolved significantly over the years by technology advancements, policy initiatives, and through the increasing digital literacy in the country. India's journey towards comprehensive digital governance reflects a very strategic approach, and we have seen a lot of examples being spoken today in the morning around Aadhaar, UPI, how they have kind of given a new dimension to the digital revolution within the country. And in this panel session, we would engage in a very interactive discussion on how the various government departments are viewing comprehensive digital governance as part of their philosophy in terms of their governance. And with no further ado, my first question is to you, Sir Amit. Sir, as part of Viksit Bharat Sankalp Yatra by the government of India in Ladakh in November of last year, can you please highlight the vision of adopting digital technologies in efficient administration in the areas of rural and Panchayati Raj department?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for the question. In fact, I would like to highlight a couple of things while answering your question. This Viksit Bharat Sankalp Yatra was held in Ladakh, like all other places across the nation, in November, December. And as part of the digital missions, like coincidentally, I happen to be handling rural development department also as Secretary Rural Development. So we have been taking a lot of initiatives so far as implementation of all these digital concepts are concerned, and the big example is like we have implemented it's in the final stages of inauguration, statewide area network, in which we are linking up almost 200 panchayats of the whole of the Union Territory of Ladakh through digital mode, in which person sitting at the last mile point, that is almost near China border, would be able to actually get connected with the headquarters, be it officers sitting in the secretariat or even in the honorable LG office. So this is a very special kind of initiative so far as, and this is a very strategic location, Ladakh. You all know that there have been so many things often happening which are, to be keenly watched, and that's why it happens whenever it happens. So there you require such kind of connectivity and initiatives. And also yesterday only we were very keen to take few very steps, like 4G saturation is happening there, like towers being erected in almost every village where we'll have 4G connectivity, and we got a commitment from BSNL, who is the player who is doing it, and I think by the end of September we'll have everywhere 4G connectivity. Similarly, I believe a lot of banking initiatives are being taken in which we are encouraging BC model and Aadhaar enabled services, which will have people sitting in very far-flung areas. If anybody amongst you has visited, and if you know the topography of Ladakh, it's very vast spread. Like villages are quite at a distance. Like people, it's a very sparsely populated. But then it has all the potential to become a very place where a lot of things can be done in times to come, and we look forward to all the national players who are sitting here, who can come over there and contribute their bit. And under Viksit Bharat, this is a top priority of even the government of India, because it has a lot of relevance. So many initiatives are coming up there, in the sense we are coming up with our own state-of-the-art data center out there, and then on cloud we'll be hosting a lot of our applications in times to come, and services are being made online, because it's a newly carved out union territory, if you know. So everything had to start from the scratch. But then as a part of the Viksit Bharat Yatra mission, as you pointed out, total impetus is to reach up to the last mile person sitting in the villages. And we are very confident that in times to come, many areas which actually we missed out will be covered up. And the examples are like this only. Recently, we have had the opportunity of organizing last conclave of the same scale was held in November, in which we invited many people, many players across, many corporates had come, and almost 20 states participated. So this shows the resolve of the UT administration to take it to the new level of digitization and digital transformation, which is very much the need of the hour there.
Thank you, sir. It was very heartening to listen to all that you said, and how the connectivity and initiatives that the government is bringing in is going to benefit the society at large. Going forward, my next question is to you, ma'am, Ms. Marine Joseph. What is your perspective on having a comprehensive digital governance strategy, and how do you, and if you can share any of your experiences of how some of these emerging technologies are being used by the department?
As far as the police department is concerned, AI has already been leveraged to a great extent in the last couple of years, and still offers a lot of scope for improving policing in all aspects. As all of you would be knowing, police is a very manpower intensive department. When we think of the police force, the first thing which comes to mind is the rank and the file and the policeman standing on the street. But it's remarkable the way technology has been leveraged in the last couple of years to actually improve the reach of policing services, and also reduce the need for this kind of manpower intense policing. That's not to say that a man can ever be replaced by a machine or by AI, but it has really helped us to rationalize our manpower, and also equitably distribute the limited resources which are available. And a few examples are predictive analysis. So we use predictive analysis to actually identify crime hotspots, areas which require, say, more patrolling, which analyzes historical trends, which would analyze the demographic data available, crime statistics. So all of that gets analyzed and throws up suggestions for how the resources of the police department are to be utilized. So predictive policing has succeeded to a great extent thanks to AI, and that has really been a revolution as far as policing is concerned. Facial recognition technology is another AI-driven tool which has helped police a lot. It is, of course, an evolving and ever-improving area, but at the moment, it is being used for tracing out missing persons as well as identifying suspects. Face recognition technology can also be used to scan a crowd, and persons who are already entered into the criminal database, they can be identified. So very useful during rioting or any kind of mob violence which the police faces, and also during night patrolling and other such patrolling activities. If a person appears to be suspicious, simply on an app his face can be scanned, and if he has a criminal record, it is available to the police officer who is doing the search. So these are very useful tools which have really revolutionized policing, because police is again one department which faces a lot of allegations of overreach and high-handedness. So I think technology is really the only way forward, where we really limit the kind of physical force and sort of body-to-body interaction to bring in more and more technology, which will also help us to overcome the smart crimes and sort of high-level crimes which are being committed today. The other areas where AI has been effectively used in policing are AI-powered cameras, both body-worn cameras as well as traffic cameras. So traffic cameras, I think a sub-officer has already spoken about. I was not there in that session, but I believe that has already been briefed to the audience. So that captures traffic offenses in real time, and it is far, far more efficient and effective than, say, a police officer sitting and trying to monitor through CCTV cameras all the traffic offenses which are happening. So, lakhs of challans can be generated in a single day, and in Kerala it has been implemented quite effectively, though not, of course, without controversy. It has really significantly helped to increase the amount of fines being generated, and accident rates have come down, and it has also improved compliance of traffic laws. AI-powered body-worn cameras, again, something which is slowly being introduced in various state police forces across the country. Very useful during, again, riot situations or where police has to handle a law and order situation. Again, a lot of allegations of overuse of force and all are there, as well as misbehavior by police officials. So these kind of tools actually help to, not just in image management of the police, but also in later defending, police action against unwarranted allegations. There are also AI-driven apps which are available to the public for accessing various policing services. So the public may approach the police for getting various certificates like the PCC or various other kinds of services which a local thana would be providing. So no one no longer needs to go up and down and make frequent visits to the police station. One can simply raise an application online and also track the progress of the application online. And we are very soon moving towards maybe a complete change in the way policing services are being delivered. It has been implemented quite successfully in Kerala, and very soon the physical police station may itself get reduced in relevance a lot thanks to these apps. Police is also intensely into social media analysis and monitoring. It's a very important part of our intelligence collection and also preventive policing. So before any major event where a law and order issue is anticipated, social media monitoring is done to see if anyone is trying to incite any kind of violence, or if someone is trying to sort of gather a mob or do something of that sort. So AI tools are very, very useful rather than just the old-fashioned way of simply sitting and trawling through social media. AI can sort of quickly scan through huge amounts of information and activity that is happening on various social media platforms and give us exactly what we are looking for and really help to take our intelligence analysis to the cutting edge level. The other area where AI has a huge scope, but we have not yet quite gotten there, is an improving investigation capability. As all of you are aware, very complex crimes are investigated by the state police and other investigating agencies, where a huge amounts of data often has to be analyzed. So complex economic crimes, for example, would require the investigating officer to analyze a lot of bank account statements, a lot of financial transactions. Often, which are international in scope. So it is very difficult for a single individual to maybe go through all this and reach, or even if they manage to do it, it would be a very time-consuming exercise. So AI can really go a long way in helping to analyze data which is gathered as evidence in cases and help to reach a very sharp and accurate analysis with that. Also, of course, chatbots and virtual assistants. There's great scope for taking away the drudgery of routine work, which we spend a lot of time and manpower on, and it can free up the time of our human resources to engage in more complex activities which really requires their involvement. So these are some of the ways in which police is using and can use AI in the coming days, and it'll be very interesting to watch what are the developments in this space in the years to come. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you for giving a very detailed view of how police department across the country is leveraging the emerging technologies for efficient governance and for enhanced public safety. My next question is to Mr. Kaushik Haldar, since you are next, sir. And you are from the electronics industry. So we would like to hear your perspectives of how the electronics industry, or Webel in particular, is kind of leveraging these technologies, and what are some of the challenges that you also feel is kind of a barrier in rapid adoption of these digital platforms?
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. On behalf of Government of West Bengal Department of IT and Electronics, like other state governments, we also set up several kind of digital initiative in the state as per mandate. We set up Cyber Security Center of Excellence. We have already set up Center of Excellence on Data Science and Machine Learning. We set up Cyber Forensic Laboratory. We have set up probably nation's first GPU computing data center by government. We have set up Animation Academy. We have taken a lot more initiatives. So it's basically the general initiatives that any IT and electronics department of any government does. But challenges part of it something different. Governments always create infrastructure maybe for the use of the citizens and publics for both. But what we have seen, we are the some of the few state organization who are impaneled by CERT-In, and we are also managing our state data center, where nearly 1,500 websites and 3,500 VMs are working in active mode, where we have seen that while we are auditing it for the last 4 or 5 years, we have seen that all the problems that are coming as a threat perception or in terms of information security threat to the government or to the data center or to any infrastructure, it's from the application interface. Maybe it's a mobile application, maybe it is a web application, which is being basically accessed by the citizen. So by analyzing the pattern, we have found out that the programmer who are developing the software, they are making some common mistakes with respect to their coding practice. If you look at this in a different way, that the government hires programmer in a rate which is not at per the market standard. Hope we all understand. Government has certain rules and regulations, some policies, procedure. Government has not even any, some of the government department, not even any post for the programmers also. They hire contractual programmers sometimes. They develop certain portals. And we have found out that in last 2-3 years, we have taken it in a research project, R&D project, which came out with a solution that all of the programmer know coding, they do coding, but they do not know how to write good code or secure code. So we came out with a course in state of West Bengal called Secure Coding Practice Framework, which we sent to CERT-In, Government of India, and CERT-In has recognized this program, which we are rolling out for the states, and any states, any organization, those who want to take it forward, they can take it forward. But Our submission from the state is that every state is taking different initiative for creating digital private infrastructure with respect to cyber security, information security, AI, ML and everything. But the actually ground level engineers, those who are working with this, whenever the awareness comes in the picture, we always talks about the citizen. Any awareness should be do with the citizen, but awareness also should be lying with your programmer team, your development team, your whosoever. If some organization is developing the product, then they are that know how. Suppose you offloaded a work to a third party vendor. Have you checked in your contract document, you have checked his financial credential and everything, this, that, as per the government regulations. But have you ever checked that he is developing a software, has he any idea about the Data Protection Act? Has he making the software in compliance with the Data Protection Act? We never checked. Often what we did, if it done by a big four organization or some big groups, they might fall into that software is costing also very high. But as government does develop these kinds of software, most of the software lacks this kind of problem. So my submission is that the major challenges which lies within the department with respect to the, because all the infrastructure, hardware infrastructure or network infrastructure we are using, they are basically meant by any of the OEMs, those who are commonly standards in the market. So from there, there is less challenge coming to us. Challenges coming to us with respect to the development of the application. So this kind of education for the students of the states, for the programmer of the states is very essential. That is our understanding for last few years.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for sharing your insights and some of the best practices. I think you mentioned from coding perspective as well that we should keep in mind. So my next question is for Amrit, ma'am. As you know, the present generation is well versed with digital technologies. We all probably call the alpha generation, which is born in this kind of model, right? So how do you anticipate in terms of combining the digitization with emerging technologies in terms of taking that to the in the education service line, and how you think the government will encourage leveraging these technologies for service delivery?
Good evening, everyone. I'm Director, Higher Education, Government of Punjab. I also hold the charge of Director, Employment Generation and Skills Department of the Government of Punjab. Well, having been in this field for almost about a year, what I've realized is that EdTech has truly emerged as a phenomenal, transformative force in modern educational systems worldwide, offering very innovative solutions to enhance learning outcomes for students today. In terms of why and how government should actually contribute in promoting education, EdTech and higher education in general, school education in fact as well, is why does government need to do its bit, is because I feel that India as a nation, which is such a big nation, is posed with the challenge of scale, of equity, and also of quality of education. And definitely all stakeholders combined, but without the actual intervention of government, I feel that it won't be that effective an exercise, and therefore we as part of government do understand our responsibility in this field. I also feel that across the world, nations have started to understand the importance of EdTech, and various nations across the world have started doing their own bit in terms of, say, Singapore would have sort of introduced a program of Smart Nation, which incorporates infusion of technology, not just in education, but all sectors of the economy. Similarly, the government of Estonia would have probably initiated a project Tiger, which emphasizes the importance of coding and digital skills to be incorporated and introduced to all students so that they can be much more well-versed with the demands of the digital economy today. India, if we talk about, of course, we're all aware since I think we've been talking about it all day long also, this must have figured in the earlier sessions as well, that India is promoting the new education policy 2020 in a big way, and within the overall umbrella of the NEP, there are several programs running and several platforms running such as the Swayam platform, the Diksha platform, all for again enhancing learning experiences and outcomes for today's students. Well, if I were to kind of basically say that what should be the role of government in this sector, I think it could be categorized into three broad headings. First would, of course, be making these technologies reach everybody. Like I said, equity is one of the most important things. We may be able to sort of make the best product, but if it does not reach the last mile, then I don't think it is going to be actually sort of making the difference that it was supposed to. So since I come from Punjab, I could take an example of a border district of say Fazilka or of Firozpur, or even Amritsar is a border district for that matter, Tarantaran. These are, places which get left out of most government programs because of, and I'm sure there are other people from different states who feel geographically, or many other reasons that many of our schemes don't really reach the last mile. So here's where government really needs to kind of, in terms of EdTech, think about digital literacy, think about connectivity, broadband connectivity, internet connectivity, reaching people sitting at the border, people sitting at like maybe a aspirational district where things don't really reach most of the times. When we say aspirational districts, we basically mean districts that have not, they are not at par with other districts and not maybe a national average, they're below the national average in various parameters. So it's really the role of the government to think about these pockets which get left out of most schemes. Other than that, I think a very equally important aspect in terms of EdTech in the higher education or education system, generally speaking, is also, training the trainers. I think we really need to focus on actually having a pedagogical shift in enhancing the skills of the educators of this country, and unless they are on board, we may have all the best systems in the world and the new technology, and if our teachers or our educators are not really well equipped or on board with that system, I think it would eventually fail. So we need to equally think about students as well as the teachers. The third, and I think the least spoken aspect of AI and virtual learning and enhanced learning and artificial intelligence is the policy framework. You see, the government also needs to be responsible that it is, in fact, we're talking about students who are young, tender minds, and when we offer them, a digital world, we are offering them a lot of things which could negatively impact them as well. So there are nations which have actually thought about it, like the US, and they have regulations like the COPPA, which is the Child, Privacy Protection Act online, so that, these young, tender, moldable minds are not affected by things which they should not be exposed to at that age, but should get the benefit of digital literacy. So that's another aspect which is equally important, which the government really needs to focus on. So in conclusion, I really think it is, making digital literacy effective in terms of reaching everybody, the policy framework, and of course training the trainers. So those are the three aspects that government really needs to look at. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. I think it was very, probably very clearly articulated strategy and philosophy that you have described in terms of providing a comprehensive view, not just from students, from teachers, connectivity. I think it's well appreciated. Thank you so much for sharing your views. Now, Manish, to you as such now, any comprehensive digital governance panel session will not be complete without talking about cybersecurity, right? So we heard in the morning about in one of the panels where all the applications are up and running, but they say that server down hai, right? So while digital infrastructure is very essential for us to design, but at the same time, one of the most critical things that we tend to give less focus is on cybersecurity. So what would be your guidance to governments in terms of deciding and looking at cybersecurity as a very important part of implementation of comprehensive digital governance initiatives?
Rishi, you have actually set up and fueled the conversation. So first of all, I would like to congratulate Fahim for organizing this, where you're talking about technology and you're talking about the compliances and the other law thing. In my opinion, first of all, whenever there is an invention or there is a technology, it comes with different challenges, right? So Dr. Shafaqat was telling about the doing surgery through robotics. My question is, what if surgery fails? I mean, who are you going to sue? You cannot sue robot because it's not a legal body. So there are a lot of challenges. There are a lot of gray areas. So dignities are here from the enforcement departments. What I'm saying is, if there is a cyber crime, you roll it out, you complain it, and you finally, after the investigation, you know that it's the IP address is not from India. Then it comes to territorial jurisdiction. That's a question. So there will be a lot of challenges with the new technology which comes up. Now, the point is, since morning I've been here and I'm seeing all the OEMs talking about cybersecurity. Zscaler, I was seeing that they were talking about cybersecurity, and networking thing, Juniper was there. My point was, everyone is talking about data security. When would we start talking about data privacy? Because what we need to understand is data security and data privacy are two entirely different things. Data security talk about how you secure your data, and privacy does not at all talk about this. Privacy is an individual right. I still remember 2017, there was a Puttaswamy judgment when Supreme Court declared that right to privacy is the fundamental right now. It's your fundamental right. Data principle or user, as a user, I should know where is my data. You're collecting my data, it's okay. You can be a government body, you can be a private body, it does not matter. If you have my data, I should know where my data is. I should be notified accordingly. First of all, you should get my consent before you take my data. And then Justice B.N. Shri Krishna committee came up and this DPDP started working on, and there were 2 JPCs come in and a lot of changes came in. So the point still remains that one is the organization side, second is the citizen side. And I'm sure this is, it's the onus is on that individual as well when we talk about data principle. Here in the room, if I ask, how many of us would know there is a site, cybercrime.gov.in? So these dignitaries are there from IPSS, they will know. How many would know this 1930? And even if you know that there is a 1930 or cybercrime.gov.in, do we know that if it is a commercial fraud or if it is a financial fraud, there are other alternatives also? The state principal or the secretary of the state, who is the adjudicating officer, has a adjudication power of 5 crores. So there's something which comes as an awareness. So this is, when I talk about the solution as well, one is the product, what you talk about, like Yashvir and Rajesh was talking about AI for the networking and networking for the AI. So the privacy has to come by design. Whether government is developing application or they are outsourcing it, the privacy should be by design. It should be embedded by design in the application. It should not be that there's a separate layer. It's a front layer where you classify the data or you do the privacy thing and then you're saying that application runs like this. It has to come within the application. So first is that privacy by design should come. Second is the awareness part. So I was just talking to Haldar Saab. So he said that he has trained more than 3,000 people in West Bengal for cyber awareness and all. So these are the initiatives what we have to take. So as an end user, it is not that we just spread that strong password should be there, or we need not to share the OTP, or we need not to get the spam mails or click on that or something. Or these are very basics. So we need to train them that there are other things also which come up. So few educational videos can be there, or these are the awareness campaign which should be run not on the enforcement agencies, not for the government employees, rather it should go from top to bottom and should be spread out to all the citizens. And last is the compliance part. So which is, is the governance has to take care of it. So it is not only the management of the compliances, it should be the monitoring, a regular monitoring of the compliances, be it regulatory compliance, be it statutory compliance, which forces an organization to adhere to few policies or guidelines. With that, organization should have their internal compliances or the policies also. If I have to go for 27,000, it's not a government compliance. I don't know, it's a certain guideline that for the international security measure, I have to have 27,001. It's a business compliance. But I should have within the organization also a few compliances. And there should be a proper monitoring of that. I think these few things would be the basics when we talk about the governance and the compliances. The flow has to be from top to bottom. This would be my submission.
Thank you so much. Thank you for summarizing. I think data privacy was an important point that you touched upon, as well as awareness that is necessary as part of the various programs that the government is kind of initiating. But at the end of the day, it's the end user who has to be aware of those things. So thank you for sharing your insights, and thank you for all. I think we are right on time. Once again, thank you for all joining for this very important topic on comprehensive digital governance, because it's not just about initiating various digitization programs, but it's all about how do you bring together all the different angles to it. We spoke about cyber security, we spoke about connectivity, we spoke about various stakeholders, how do we get them together. And then then you spoke about privacy and awareness as well, right? So all of this together is quite essential for it to be a successful program. And something like Aadhaar and UPI have come in, not just because they opened up just a platform, but it's more comprehensively working towards an end goal. So thank you again. Thank you very much.
We thank the moderator and all the panelists. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge with us. It was indeed a great session. Can we give them a round of applause, everyone? Thank you so much. And of course, we will want to felicitate all of you for your valuable time and presence. And to do the honors, I would like to invite on stage Mr. Yashveer Singh, Director, Government Sales from Juniper Networks. Can we welcome sir with a round of applause, please? Very firstly, we would want to felicitate the moderator, Mr. Rishi. Thank you so much, sir, for your time, and thank you for facilitating the session. We would also want to felicitate Ms. Merin Joseph. Thank you so much, ma'am, for your time and expertise here with us. We would also like to thank Mr. Amit Sharma. Thank you so much, sir, for being here with us today. We would also like to thank Ms. Amrit Singh. Thank you so much, ma'am, for being here with us. We also thank Mr. Kaushik Helder. Thank you so much, sir. Last but not the least, we would also want to thank Mr. Manish Manocha. Thank you so much, everybody, for being here with us today. Indeed, it was a great discussion. Thanks for highlighting the topics which needed attention. Requesting all of you to please step a foot forward for a group photograph.